And now, the Rink Rap podcast from Forever Blueshirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerney.
What's up, Blue Shirts faithful? I'm Jim Cerney. Welcome to the Rink Rap podcast this week. It is great to be back hanging out with you again. I was out on the West Coast last week, flew out to Palm Springs, a few days of, late season R&R, if you will. I think we all need a little R&R, a little rest and relaxation away from the Broadway Blue Shirts. Oh my gosh. Just when you thought it was going well. In fact, I think when I left, right, they were on a 4-game winning streak, and then, it just all went to hell when I was away, but that's okay. Don't blame me. It's not on me. But yeah, a little R&R out in Palm Springs. Every day but one out there, I believe, was over 100 degrees. But you know how they tell you out in the desert, and Palm Springs obviously is the desert. You know how they tell you that it's dry heat, and there's a difference. Listen, 100 degrees is 100 degrees. It's still pretty blazing, right? And you still got to lather up and make sure after a long winter on the East Coast, you don't get absolutely fired, on fire, with all the sun hitting your face and your legs and your arms and all that. But it's true. Without that humidity, first of all, the temperature really goes down when the sun goes down. Like the temperature is like in the mid 70s when the sun would go down out in Palm Springs. So there was that, which was helpful. But, you sweat, as you walk around, and it was awesome. We spent a day at Joshua Tree National Park, great hiking there, I recommend go, if you're into that sort of thing. Beautiful nature, different kind of nature, especially from the Northeast, and you love to hike and explore. Joshua Tree National Park, do it. It was incredible, even in the 100-degree weather. And yeah, there was some sweating and what have you. Just make sure you hydrate, take a lot of water. But man, I loved it, especially after this long winter. This winter has just sucked, and that's not even getting into the hockey. Just the weather and the shoveling 2 feet of snow, and we got massive dumped on twice with snowstorms this winter, and oh yeah, the hockey hasn't been so great if you're a New York Rangers fan either. So we'll get to that. That was my vacation. Hey, thanks to Lou Orlando from Forever Blueshirts and from Sportsnaut. He filled in last week. I hope you tuned into his podcast. I know he got into a bunch of different topics. Thanks to him for stepping in for me while I was away. But I am back this week. Got a special guest as well come up in segment number 2 today. That is Nick Alberga from Leafs Nation. You may also know him from his time at NHL Network. He's done some work at NHL.com on the fantasy side, hosting a podcast there. He is a great dude. He's a funny dude. He's super knowledgeable. We got Rangers and Maple Leafs on Wednesday night in Toronto. So we do a little run up there, and we're going to talk about really which team is more disappointing this season, right? These two, original 6 behemoths, in these big cities that just have stunk up the joints this season, respectively. Who's the bigger disappointment, the Rangers or the Maple Leafs? Which team can spin out of this and turn it around quicker this offseason and the following off seasons? The Rangers, the Maple Leafs, the Golden Muzzy, as he's known in social media circles. Nick Alberga and I will break that down in segment number 2. A lot to get to in the opening segment here, and we'll do a bunch of quick hits before we welcome in Nick Alberga. And if you're wondering why, yeah, I haven't totally given up on hockey. And yes, I'm going to be with you the entire off season, which is going to, for the second year in a row, is going to arrive a heck of a lot sooner than any of us wanted, at least from a Rangers standpoint. But, everything that happens this off season, we're going to be on top of at foreverblueshirts.com and right here on the Rink Rap podcast as well. Great guests to come during the off season. So stick with us, because we're going to be sticking with you. We're going to be all over everything, possible trades, all the rumors, certainly the draft lottery, all these things that are super important to the Rangers, breaking down the prospect pool, winners and losers this season, keep them, trade them, let them go. All those things will be taking place this offseason. So I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not going to lie. It's baseball season. Talk about another team that pisses me off. My New York Mets. Yep, I'm back. I'm back all the way in. Really, I never went away, even though the absolute collapse of last season still rings, in my head. But yeah, I got the hat on. Opening day is coming up on Thursday. I'm all in on Freddie Peralta. Hey, let's see, Carson Bench, excited about him. Different look, different lineup this season. Yeah, I'm going to miss Pete Alonso, but whatever. Times are changing, right? Let's see what the Mets can do this season. Yes, I am all back in 162 games worth. Then there are the New York Rangers. So often, one of the things the Rangers do really, really well are these celebrations at Madison Square Garden. And this year, Centennial year, they've had quite a few different celebrations, bringing out former players, celebrating their history. A history that we should point out is only, we've only seen 4 Stanley Cup champions and none since 1994. And before that, none since 1940 prior to 1994. So that is 1 Stanley Cup championship in really a couple of generations, right? Going back to 1940. But okay, there's still a rich history there. There's still a bunch of fan favorites, great Rangers like Andy Bathgate and Rod Gilbert, and both of them rest in peace. But recent great Rangers too, popular Rangers, and one of them is Mika Zibanejad. And I thought the Rangers did a really good job by having his wife, and maybe it was her idea, maybe it was their idea, but having his wife narrate and speak from the heart above his tribute video on Monday night at Madison Square Garden prior to his 1000th NHL game, which is a heck of an accomplishment. Less than 500 players in the entire history of the National Hockey League have played that many games. So a very, very cool moment for him. And to have his wife narrate that video, it was great. And like I said, the Rangers tend to do these celebrations really well. These pregame get-togethers. And listen, they gave the Zibanejad family, a paid trip to Greece. I'd sign up for that. That's pretty cool. The silver stick that players get for their milestone 1000th game, he got that. But they also made a smaller version for his daughter, Ella. Just check it off. Good job. Listen, there's a lot to knock about the Rangers, but they got this ceremony. They nailed this ceremony. I put on Twitter from my @JimCerney account. Oh, X. I'm sorry, not Twitter. X, my X account. That I've been through so many of these ceremonies over the years with the Rangers. Before I worked for them, when I just covered them, then when I worked for them, then after that, when I just cover them again, as a reporter. I've been through so many of these, but they tend to really, really hit the mark. Jersey retirements or, milestone moments, or this year, the Centennial, nights that they've had at the Garden. It's just so unfortunate that this group of players pretty much face planted on all of the special nights this season in the Centennial season, right? They had the cool new jerseys, for their Centennial nights, and they weren't wearing them last night. They were the traditional blues, but the cool swag going on for their Centennial jerseys, and in front of some of the great Ranger players that are still living and would join these different celebrations. They face planted left, right, and center. I mean, Rangers have only won 9 games at Madison Square Garden all season, so there you go. But no bigger faceplant than what happened on a night that one of their current alternate captains, one of their leaders, the longest tenured New York Rangers player, is saluted and celebrated and honored before playing his 1000th NHL game. against the Ottawa Senators, which side note, that's pretty cool how that worked out, right? That, number 1,000 was against the team that he played his first NHL game for, the team that drafted him number 6 overall back in 2011. Very cool, kind of sidebar there to it. But okay, moving past that. Great ceremony. You think the team's fired up. Hey, this is our guy. Let's come out and let's really give an effort here tonight. Because the Rangers aren't exactly great starters, right? And we saw that just 24 hours before Sunday afternoon in the game against Winnipeg when it was basically a no-show first period. Well, guess what? The Rangers did better than that. Better, air quotes. Because not only did they have a no-show first period Monday night after the ceremony, played with zero juice, and basically were, manhandled by the Ottawa Senators in the first period. But despite how, Mike Sullivan tried to sugarcoat it that, the second period was better until we started taking penalties, really, that no-show was pretty much the entirety of the game. Yeah, there was a little bit better effort. Third period, they came on, they showed some life, they got the goal. Cartier, great rush up ice. Boy, what a great addition he's been, right? And cost them nothing. Cartier sprints up, right wing, sets up Connor Sherry. Stop yelling, throwing things at the screen, or whipping off your headset here, screaming at me because I mentioned the name Connor Sherry. But Connor Sherry buries that pass from Cartier, and the Rangers back in the game, miraculously in the game 2-1. Obviously didn't have enough juice, didn't get enough opportunities anymore the rest of the way. They finished. We thought they finished with a franchise low 9 shots on goal in the game. 2 in the first, 2 in the second, 5 in the third period. We find out this morning, we wake up that no, they did not tie the franchise record, which was set back in December of 1955, more than 70 years ago, to find this just terrible effort, this inadequate effort, this just inability to put the puck on net. That was the New York Rangers. First time in 70 plus years that they were held to so few shots on goal. But we woke up this morning and found out, hey, here's the good news. They went through the tapes. They found another shot on goal, I think in the first period. All right. Not in the record books. Not in the record books. 10 shots on goal. Guess what? It doesn't matter. It still sucks. It was still a subpar effort. And boy, man, Dave Maloney on the TV side, right? I know he's passionate. I know Dave personally, and I know he takes things personally, when it comes to the New York Rangers, former captain of the team. And he bleeds Rangers blue. Man, did he tear them up. Tear them up on air, broadcasting on the MSG Network, home of the New York Rangers. Did he tear them up in that first period for lack of effort, not skating, not winning battles, not competing? I mean, listen, Ottawa should have run away with this one. So, hats off to Igor Shesterkin. He was solid. And, he allowed 2 goals, really didn't have much of a chance on either one of them. And also, hey, give the Rangers some credit, because I thought their best efforts throughout the game were on the 6 power plays that followed the first one. Shane Pinto scored the first power play goal for Ottawa. But then on the ensuing 6 power plays, because it was a parade to the box by the Rangers, including both JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck taking, double minors, 4 minutes worth of penalties at the same time. The Rangers penalty kill came through. So I give him credit for that. Yeah, it was Igor between the pipes, but Rangers did a good job stacking up that blue line, stopping Ottawa, not, kind of keeping them into the outside. Not a lot of grade A looks on Ottawa's power plays. I give the Rangers credit for that, right? But 5-on-5, oh my gosh. What was it? 5 of the 10 shots on goal were at even strength. That is 60 minutes of hockey. Not all of it played 5-on-5, of course, or at even strength. I get it. but 5 even strength shots on goal by the New York Rangers. I mean, unacceptable. And Dave Maloney, man, he lost his mind. But there are fans out there that said, hey, yeah, I get so many people that sent me messages over at X and on social media and said, hey, good news. You know what? I was more upset when the Rangers were winning 4 in a row than I am now that they've lost 5 in a row and they can't manage shots on goal. They're getting run out of their own building, even on a special night for Mika Zibanejad. Because more lottery balls. Rangers have been moving a little bit farther away in their chances, on tankathon were getting worse. The percentage of, maybe winning the draft lottery was shrinking for the Rangers. Well, guess what? Now they're tied for the second worst record, second fewest points in the NHL. I mean, Vancouver's going to finish with the worst record in the NHL. So they're going to have the best chance in the draft lottery. The New York Rangers now, they're there with the Chicago Blackhawks and a couple other teams. I think the Rangers are at 65 points. So is Chicago. Boy, talk about tangent jumping here. That set up a tankathon game in Chicago on Friday night. You talk about games that, normally you'd circle it on the calendar. Oh, we're going to kick Chicago's ass or whatever. Now Ranger fans are like, we don't want that. We don't want that. Can't lose. I mean, you can't beat Chicago. You got to lose that game. Same thing with that game, Toronto, on Wednesday, because Toronto's just 6 points ahead of the Rangers, in the Eastern Conference standings or in the overall standings, so they could still fall back. Fans want the Rangers to lose. More fans than I even thought would want them to lose right now. So they were okay. They're like, 9 shots, 10 shots, 0 shots. Hey, I saw somebody message me on social media today. I apologize. I'd like to give credit to the person who sent me this. I put a tweet out there, saying how now, they found an extra shot on goal for the Rangers. It's now 10. It's not a record tying 9. Oh boy, and the person messaged back goes, hey, I'm all good if they only have 9 shots on goal, in Chicago, because they need to lose that game. I want them to direct all 9 shots at their own goalie, at Igor. That's what we want. That's where we are. That's where we are right now with the New York Rangers. Brutal. Now, your long suffering is almost over, but it's going to be intriguing to see how they pull out of this. And Nick and I will talk about it in the next segment for sure. Speaking of goalies, Igor was great and has been really, really good since he's come back from his injury. He's among the league leaders in save percentage this season at .912. There's been a lot of crap that went on with the Rangers this season, and I know their team goals against is really brutal, but it's not because of that guy. Like his goals against, I think he's at 2.5, a little more than 2.5 goals a game. And like a game like yesterday, he's standing on his head, caught some breaks, got some iron luck, with shots that hit crossbar and post. But he was terrific in this one, and has been since he came back from his injury. So that's the Igor take. But how about Dylan Garand finally getting his NHL debut? And boy, did he step up, on Sunday. Now, of course, his teammates didn't give him the full support you would have hoped, especially in that first period when, if not for Garand, they were outshot 11-3. If not for Garand in that first period, I mean, again, that's another game that would have gotten away from the Rangers early, and they don't have the firepower to come back in most cases this season. It would have been a lost cause after 20 minutes. But Garand held him in it. And, he allowed a goal in the first period, but that was it. I thought it was super composed. Loved his glove. Super confident with it. I like the swag. He was making these glove saves and flashing it like this, kind of flicking it back. Even on a routine save, he's got a little swag to him. I like it. And then, he went out, he aggressively played the puck up ice a couple times, trying, kind of channeling his inner Igor, if you will, getting that puck up ice. Good on Dylan Grant. It's his 4th season in the organization, 4th year pro, all spent at Hartford up until getting this opportunity with Jonathan Quick sideline. I had called for Garand to get this opportunity earlier in the season in January when Igor was out. You knew Igor was out long term. And then, listen, things were not going well with Jonathan Quick making all those starts. They went the veteran route, called up Spencer Martin. Then I thought it should have been Dylan Garand because they have to make a decision on this guy. He's a restricted free agent, arbitration rights in the offseason. And I know he's still a young guy, 23, he'll be 24 next season, but you got to decide on him, right? Is he going to be your backup? Is he the heir apparent to become the number 2? Not heir apparent to replace Igor, of course, but to take the Jonathan Quick role where you can trust him for 2025 starts in the NHL. Well, I'd like to find that out now before you make a long-term decision or even a short-term decision on his future or the future of some, backup goaltender that you signed in free agency. I'd like to find that out sooner than later this offseason. So in helping you make that decision, you give him some starts here in the second half of a lost season, right? But we don't even know that he'll get a second start. If Quick is healthy, Quick is going to be back in there. Dylan's going to be back in the minors. And, there we go. And speaking of the minors, another thing I know that the fans are really fired up about, and I'm excited for the kid too, because he's such a good kid, such a hardworking, good kid that has really improved his game a lot this season, his all-around game. He's starting to put up some points at Hartford in his third pro season, and that's Adam Sikora. He has been recalled from the minors, so Connor Mackey was sent back down. The defenseman, Connor Mackey, went back down, and of course, that's because another guy to get a look at, Drew Fortescue, signed his entry-level contract, so he now is the extra defenseman, I would assume, when the Rangers go into Toronto, but could be in the lineup as soon as Friday in Chicago. I think the Rangers want to see him practice with the group and get used to their systems and what have you before they throw him into his NHL debut. But, I think we're going to see a lot of Fortescue down the stretch of the season, which is good by me. Let's see what he is. He's been a shutdown defenseman for 3 seasons at BC, was a shutdown defenseman for the United States in back-to-back World Junior Championship wins in 24 and 25. Let's see what he's got. I know he's still a kid, 20, 21 years old, Gabe Perreault's buddy. But let's see what he's got. And let's see, is he an option to be the third pair on the left side, next season? If that's the case, and you got Matthew Robertson also on the left side, a young defenseman, a little bit more experience, but he's proven capable of playing on the second pair. Then you're not paying a lot of money to 2 good young defensemen that you're developing. But let's not put the cart before the horse and all that. Let's give him an opportunity here. Rangers should give him an opportunity down the stretch, get a feel for what he brings, and then let's see what he does in training camp. And if he ends up in Hartford, and I made this argument for Gabe Perreault too, if he ends up in Hartford to begin his rookie pro season, okay, nothing wrong with that, especially a defenseman, right? That's a tough spot to master. Just look at Matthew Robertson, right? It's not always immediate. Maybe it will be for Fortescue. We'll see. Maybe he can just make that jump from college to the NHL. But if he doesn't, that's okay. That's okay. But that's for next season. Let's see what he's got. Let's see how he fits in here down the stretch. I don't think he's going to play in Toronto because of what Sully said about wanting to get him into practices. But we might be able to see him Friday in Chicago. We'll see. But Adam Sikora, third year in the organization, he's still just 21 years old. I mean, he was so young when he came over and played at Hartford. And he's a guy that's still building up physically because he's not the biggest guy. But, he's an energy guy. He's super positive, super popular kid. Great personality. And he can play, right? I think in the NHL, he's a bottom 6 guy. So he's even seen some, top 6 minutes recently for Hartford. But, in the NHL, let's be realistic. He's a bottom 6 guy. So maybe, does he one day fit on a line with Noah Laba and Ty Cartier on a third line? Is he good enough to do that? Well, maybe we'll start finding out, right? Maybe we'll start finding out here. Is he a fourth line guy? I don't know. We'll see. Let's give him a chance at the NHL level. He gets called up. I think we'd all probably agree. I'd rather see more of him down the stretch than I would, Juuso Parssinen, who I think we know what he is and know all of his limitations. And I think we all know how the coach feels about him. I don't think Sully's a fan by any stretch of the imagination. Don't need, listen, I love Johnny Brodzinski, but he is what he is, and he's probably not going to be back next season. He's an unrestricted free agent. You need to see Adam Sikora play. And on defense, you need to see Drew Fortescue play. And you need to see Vincent Iorio play. And if he gets called up again, you need to see Scott Morrow play. And Ty Cartier's got to continue to play his 14, 15 minutes a night as he is. This is what the final 3 weeks of the season is all about for the New York Rangers. And Gabe Perreault, keep running him out there. Hey, the wells run a little dry for that line, right? Now he and Lafreniere and Zibanejad, they were smoking hot there for a stretch, for quite a stretch, after the Olympic break and certainly during the 4-game winning streak. Now it's running a little bit dry. So let's see how the kid can pull out of that. He's still out there working, but he's pretty quiet the last couple games. And Alexis Lafreniere, hey, great. You gave us a taste again. You gave us a taste, Alexi. Now let's see. Let's see more from you. Let's see how you bounce back. Keep doing the things you were doing when the puck was going in the net. Keep getting to the net. Be a physical presence. Create. Finish. I know he's had 20 goals this season, but finish. Okay? So that's the state of the Rangers right now. They head to Toronto, as we touched on Wednesday. And again, I know the fans want them to lose this one. Toronto fans want the Maple Leafs to lose this one. Everybody wants more ping pong balls, a better chance in the draft lottery. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the two big disappointments, the original 6 teams. Which one's been a bigger disappointment? Which one can turn it around quicker? We'll get to all that with Nick Alberga from Leafs Nation and Leafs Morning Take. He's our guest. He's coming up next right here on Rink Rap. Welcome back to Rink Rap. I'm Jim Cerney. We're going to have a lot of fun in this next segment. We are joined by the Golden Muzzy himself, Nick Alberga from the Leafs Nation. He hosts it. He directs it. Works with Jay Rosehill. And right there, he's a tough guy to be able to do that. So deal with Jay on a daily basis. In fact, I think you're fresh out of the penalty box with Jay today. So thanks for sharing a few minutes with us.
My pleasure, bud. Yeah, it's like babysitting, but tough guys, when they spout, you just let them go off. I mean, a lot of history, a lot of experience, and certainly I'd love a lot more of that from the Maple Leafs these days. That's for sure. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm doing well. Can you find two chumps right now doing a podcast that cover teams that are more disappointing than the New York Rangers and Toronto Maple Leafs?
Oh, and that's a really good debate to start. It's like, what
Right.
team is more disappointing? Because I'll be honest, Jim, like I actually had the Rangers doing something significant this year, not just making the playoffs, maybe winning a Stanley Cup. I thought Mike Sullivan was the answer to everything with that franchise. Yet here we are. It's late in March. They're contending for a lottery pick, and there's a lot of dysfunction, very similar to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I, for one, specifically when looking at the Rangers, I'm very, very stunned that they're in this predicament right now.
Yeah, and that's the great debate, right? Because I thought they'd be a playoff team, certainly in playoff contention. I thought the Sully factor alone, the embarrassment of last year, full year of JT Miller, who by the way, played great after they got him from Vancouver last season. And boy, it's been a rough go for him this year. I saw, I don't know that I saw Stanley Cup, but I certainly saw Stanley Cup playoff contender and likely in the postseason. And it has just completely come undone. What I didn't quite foresee was it completely coming undone for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year, even with the Mitch Marner, Mitch Marner leaving this offseason. So let's go back to the point that we just raised. Bigger disappointment, New York Rangers, Toronto Maple Leafs this season.
Yeah, I think you're leaning me towards the Maple Leafs, and I get that. I think when you look at the last decade and you think about the star power on that roster, it makes a lot of sense. And you think more about year one under Craig Berube. It felt like the team was headed in more of a direction that could bring them potentially a Stanley Cup. In fact, they get to the furthest point in the Stanley Cup playoffs for that organization in about 25 years. They get to Game 7 of Round 2. Granted, Game 5 and Game 7 against Florida, complete no-shows, and it felt like they were in the driver's seat, by the way, in that series, up 2-0. Had a 2-goal lead multiple times in Game 3 in Sunrise on the road, and we know the rest is history with the Panthers going back-to-back. But I think from the Maple Leafs perspective, it's just been such a massive disappointment from the onset, whether it's goaltending, whether it's team defense, and the star players haven't pulled their weight either. I know the numbers look appetizing on paper for Willie Nylander, but he's been a shell of himself in terms of an all-around player this season. Austin Matthews has been a shell of the guy who scored 69 goals a couple of years ago. So, it's so interesting when you look at this team as, and aside of maybe Oliver Ekman-Larsson, everybody's had a down year. And that's why I think this team is in this predicament too. It's ugly.
Yeah, it's ugly. And is the hate for Austin Matthews real up there? Like, it is Austin Matthews. Is the hate real? The vibes that we're getting from up north?
I don't think hate's the right word, and it's funny you bring that up because we just had a really strong debate with Mike Grinnell of Spit and Chicklets. Jay Rosehill went toe-to-toe with him regarding the media coverage on Matthews and everything that's transpired since the Olympics, and we've had that discussion. The political part I never agreed with. I think, he took part in opportunities, the captain of Team USA. There'd be more backlash if he didn't go to the White House, but that's not really what we're getting at here. I think all the market wants is accountability. And I can't look back at this administration specifically with Matthews as captain the last couple of years and think, wow, that team has held each other accountable. He doesn't have the characteristics, and granted, everybody's different in this league than you would find from like a Nathan McKinnon or a Cale Makar or a McDavid or a Draisaitl. I don't view Austin Matthews as an alpha, so I don't think people hate the guy. I just think people wonder if he's capable of leading a team to victory. And granted, you can make the case that he led the Americans, to a gold medal in Milan, and I get that, but it comes on the heels of a 3-on-3 goal here from Jack Hughes and a great performance from Connor Hellebuck. It's just if it goes the other way and the Canadians win, then what do you think the conversation is going to be about Austin Matthews? I thought he was okay in that tournament. He looked very similar to the guy we've seen throughout this season with the Maple Leafs, where it's he blends in way more than he should, especially when you get that type of money. So it's more so about accountability. I don't think there's any hatred. People love Austin Matthews in this market, but when you make that much money, you're the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's a specific standard that people hold you to.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know they're not the same level player. JT Miller, obviously, at least in my book, he's not exactly Austin Matthews. But that said, boy, has he come under fire. This season is his first season as captain with Rangers, his first full season back here in New York, because it has just gone sideways. And I remember, doing some interviews, being a guest on Vancouver radio shows, and they're like, JT Miller is captain. Are you sure about this? I'm like, well, first of all, I didn't hire the guy. I didn't trade for him. That's above my pay grade. But they're like, if it doesn't go well, if things don't go with the Rangers, it's going to go really badly for JT Miller. And I know you're on the outside, you're not in New York, but from the outside, what have you seen there with JT? Because it is certainly a lot, injuries have a lot to do with it, but it has really gone sideways. And this fan base is turning quickly on JT Miller.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that name, and I know you're a frequent listener of NHL Network Radio, and the late Boomer Gordon used to talk to me about JT Miller quite a bit because I recall my time at NHL Network Radio. We asked the questions, and I did specifically, why do these teams keep looking to trade JT Miller? That's the conversation for me started 10 years ago, where he was 23 and already on this second or third NHL team, of course, drafted by the Rangers, then goes to Tampa, then goes to Vancouver, back to the New York Rangers. And if he's such a beloved, leader and figurehead in the room, why are teams always looking to move out from JT Miller? I think he comes with an expiry date, but I do concur with you. I think it's been a massive disappointment because unlike Austin Matthews, there was this perception that JT Miller is this larger than life leader and has this persona and this aura to him, and he has not dragged this New York Rangers team into the fight. I agree with you. I think he's been banged up for the majority of the season, but he has not been good. I mean, it starts with your play on the ice. He hasn't played like a captain. He hasn't played like one of the better teams, one of the more higher paid players on that roster. So I think for all the conversation in the offseason about maybe it's a coaching thing, and we just had Peter Laviolette on my show last week. We thought Mike Sullivan, maybe, hey, he can rectify this. He can get the guys going. He's got the familiarity as well with JT Miller from the Olympic program and the national program. It just hasn't worked out. I think much similar, and it starts from leadership. There seems to be a lot of dysfunction, oozing of this dysfunction, even watching from 3,000 feet the way I am here in Toronto, as opposed to being right smack dab on Broadway. I think very similar to the Maple Leafs, the chemistry has not been there for a couple of years here for this Rangers team.
Yeah, which is crazy because, you know, they pushed themselves and had a franchise best season, the first season under Peter Laviolette, winning the President's Trophy. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, second time in 3 seasons. But boy, you know, and like I know you said you view it from 3,000 feet away. Yeah, you could see the cracks. Like in that series against Florida, you could see the cracks. If you followed the team every day during that season, you saw how Igor was just covering up so much along the way. But what happened last year and the beginning of the dysfunction and leading to the retool, as Chris Jury calls it this season, that was the shock to me. That how it completely unraveled and how all the off ice and lack of chemistry and the issues with the front office, how that just really tore through the room and broke that team. And then Chris Jury decided to, you know, start dismantling right from last year. To me, that was the big surprise with them.
It's interesting with the Rangers too. Like you think about where they were just a couple short years ago in a conference final to where they're at now. It's like, it just shows you. And the Leafs are another prime example, how quickly things can unravel, because you're so right. It just, ever since like the Gaudreau conversation, the Trouba conversation, for a team that was widely regarded as tight knit and strong and up and coming, they got the goalie, they got the number 1 defenseman, they got the guys up front and looked ready to win. Here we are a couple years removed from that, and it feels like they're still tail spinning and going the opposite direction. And the worst part about this, it feels like a lot of the heavy lifting is yet to be done. What's the future of JT Miller look like? What's the future of Adam Fox look like? We know Shesterkin's going to be there. Trocheck didn't get dealt at the deadline. Where's this Alexis Lafreniere that Johnny Lazarus loves? Like, there's just so much, there's so many questions, and this is what happens when you lose and lose routinely the way they have the last couple of years.
Yeah. And so again, we're not in trade conversations. We're not the GMs and everything, but we have opinions for sure. So from the outside, Vinny Trocheck doesn't get traded at the deadline. Do you think wise move here? You think there are going to be more suitors? Maybe there's a better deal out there during the offseason for Vinny Trocheck? Again, we don't know all the specifics.
Yeah.
But what was your take on that situation? Because everyone that covered the team, everyone from the outside, everyone just assumed Vinny Trocheck's going to be gone at the deadline.
It was a garbage deadline across the board. And my biggest reason why that was the case, it was an outlier season where that a lot of teams, I felt at least, were just happy to be there and weren't strongly considering going after it and potentially winning a Stanley Cup. Your Pittsburghs, Utah has been looking to take that next step for many years. Montreal, like the list goes on and on. So when that happens, it becomes a buyer's market where there's only a couple teams who think they're a legitimate threat or think they're in a window, like an Edmonton or a Colorado or a Dallas. And that's why you see some of these teams make that move. And I think it makes things really, really difficult for teams like the Rangers and the Maple Leafs. Like we've been joking for the last 6 weeks that the 1 year that the Maple Leafs we think are selling off for the first time in a decade. And it's a market that really never materialized. Like Brad Treliving got a lot of heat in this market for a last minute deal, trading Scott Lawton, like with minutes remaining, to the Los Angeles Kings, the return on Bob McMahon, like the list goes on, where they would have liked to be a bit more active and they weren't. And actually the one trade they did make that people liked was a deal that apparently fell in his lap because Colorado thought they weren't getting Nazem Kadri, and that's the Nick Waugh trade. So
right.
I think from the Rangers' perspective, it's one thing to say, yeah, we want to deal Vinny Trocheck, but if you're not getting an offer that's anywhere close to good PR wise and good from a team point of view where it's going to allow you to take that next step, then why wait and make that move? So I think things will certainly open up here in the off season where more teams, I think what you'll get is a lot of the teams who were disappointed by their seasons. Maybe they bounce back and say, hey, maybe we're a Vinny Trocheck away. Like Detroit is a prime example. I think you talk about teams that could have benefited from getting Vinny Trocheck. Look at Detroit down the stretch, what happened to them up the middle. I know hindsight's 2020, but Larkin goes down, Kopp goes down, JT Compher's like your 1C for like 2 weeks, and that's why Detroit very easily could miss the Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's decisions like that could impact the roster, and I think it made more sense. I know initially it stinks, but it made more sense for the Rangers to hang on to this guy, not just give him away for nothing.
Yeah, and you got Rangers Maple Leafs in Toronto, barn burner, a game that both teams need to lose. Yeah, I don't know about what they're saying up in Toronto, but Ranger fans here in New York, they're like, lose. You can't lose enough. Lose, get more, get those ping pong balls, get your, the percentage for the draft lottery up. Of course, that route didn't exactly work in the first reset for this organization, but maybe the second time around it will. But you got that game coming up tomorrow. What do you think, or who do you think out of these two teams, which team can flip it quicker? Now, you don't have the crystal ball. We don't know what does Trocheck get back? If Matthew Nyes, for example, gets traded, what do you get back for him? What's in the pipeline? Who ends up getting the higher draft pick, the better draft pick, drafts better this year? I know we don't have those crystal balls, but I'm putting you on the spot. Who do you think can flip it quicker, Rangers or Toronto? Though I see more pressure on Toronto to do so, because I don't see how any GM coach can thrive up there with the heat they're under. But that said, that's just a little side editorial. It's quicker.
It has to be the New York Rangers for me. I think you look at different pillars. I think automatically in this market, people are trying to look for a Boston-style retool. But last time I checked, there's no Swayman, there's no McAvoy, and there's no David Pastrnak. And I think I look at the Rangers. You have a top 3 goalie in the NHL, and Igor Shesterkin, pretty damn good spot to start. I think they've got some youth coming, even seeing it right now with like a Gabe Perreault. Alaba's been a nice story this season. I think it's been a down year for Alex Lafreniere. Even Fortescue's coming. Like there's some prospects in that system for the Rangers, and that's not the case for the Maple Leafs. They have absolutely nothing, and that's why from an asset standpoint, they can't even retool quickly because they got nothing to give up. So I think the job's harder. I think when you look at the Rangers, maybe they make a couple tweaks and a couple changes. You pair that with Mike Sullivan, pound for pound, one of the best coaches, in my opinion, in hockey. And I think you're able to turn that around quicker than a Maple Leafs team that's aging. They didn't change their blue line at all. They're slower. And the motivation just doesn't seem to be there with the star players. So you add that together and the recipe does not look good, especially after being a competitor for 10 years and not really being that seller. There's a reason why you don't have that assets. And again, they went all in at last year's trade deadline. So that's why they find themselves in this scary predicament. So I'd probably go, to answer your question, with the New York Rangers because I like some of the youth they have there. I love Shesterkin. I think something's still, salvageable, I would say, for Adam Fox. Like there's some pieces on that blue line. There's some pieces up front. And again, the most important part is getting a save, and they'll definitely get that with Shesterkin moving forward.
Terrific. Okay, one quick last one for you. You can do 30 seconds and under. Craig Berube definitely out, you think, at the end of the season? And to part B of that is because you mentioned Lavi, and I watched your interview the other day with him, and he was very good, saying that he's prepping for his next NHL job without campaigning for anybody's job. Could he be a candidate there, assuming Berube is let go?
Yeah, I made a joke with Lavi that he has no interest outside of the Metro division. That's all he does is coach in the Metro. But yeah, I think Berube's done. I think you even read in some of the comments and, over the weekend, he calls out Joseph Wall for needing a save. But I mean, the team is so abysmal defensively. And I think the goaltending is far from the concerns. In fact, the Leafs crease organizationally hasn't been this strong in years. I'm talking decades. They're pretty much 4 deep, which is hard to find in this day and age. I mean, health always a concern with every goalie in this league. I know it's under the microscope in this market, but you can make that case around the NHL. Look at Shesterkin, missed a big chunk of time this season. So I think you look at Berube in the body of work. I think there was a shelf life to begin with. And I think there has to be a scapegoat from a season where you anticipated vying for a Stanley Cup to just outright missing the Stanley Cup playoffs. Somebody has to take the fall. And I think at the very least, it's going to be the head coach, Craig Berube. I'm a big Berube guy. I like the addition. It just has not worked out. And in generalities, I'm more curious why teams haven't taken the Columbus approach this season. Every year, it seems like everybody is excited and wants to make a move and make a coaching change. And this year's been different with just two mixed results so far in LA. But you look at Columbus, there's your prime example. Like I've been vouching since November for maybe a coaching change to inspire and change the focus and the attention of this Maple Leafs team. They elected not to do it. And I think the writing is certainly on the wall right now with everything being said. It's very quiet up top. And that's the worst thing you can want right now as a coach if you're Craig Berube.
All right. Well, that's Nick Alberga. Appreciate you joining us today. I know you got to run, but got Rangers Maple Leafs to prep for. Get a good night of sleep, because I know, there's going to be a ton of excitement in TO for this tilt. So original six. Rangers coming off 10 shots on goal in their last game. So Joseph Woll, Anthony Stolarz, hopefully they don't fall asleep in the net on Wednesday night out in Toronto. But appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today. And we'd love to have you back on during the summer, during the off season as well. We'll break it all down again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and hang in there, Rangers fans.
Back here on Rink Rap, I'm Jim Cerney. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Thanks for liking and subscribing to the Rink Rap podcast. Following me on X at Jim Cerney. Nick Alberga, loved having him aboard. Make sure to follow him as well on X at the Golden Muzzy. And continue to read all our good stuff over at our website, foreverblueshirts.com. Quick final segment here, just touch on a couple different things. One is kind of a programming note and maybe a way that we could hook up with our good fans out there. On April 4th, it's not set in stone yet, but it looks like we're going to broadcast live from Mustang Harry's yet again. And that's a Saturday, right? So you have no school, there's no work, get your ass over to Mustang Harry's. Rangers play early in the afternoon that day. And then that night at 8:00, the New York Sirens play the first ever PWHL game at Madison Square Garden. So in between those two games, so after the Ranger game and before the Sirens game, we're looking to hook up at Mustang Harry's, get some cool guests in, talk Rangers, talk PWHL. We're going to do that, or that's what we're planning on. But I'm planting the seed now. If you can get into the city, Mustang Harry's is just steps from the Garden. So if you're at the Ranger game that afternoon, or you're heading to the Sirens game that night, or if you just want to hang out and see a great show and come say hello and support us on Rink Rap, we will be doing that again, fingers crossed. That's the plan right now, April 4th, and we'll have more details next week. And certainly we'll release more information on social media at Jim Cerney at Forever Blueshirts. But that could be a whole heck of a lot of fun on April 4th, the afternoon, Saturday afternoon at Mustang Harry's. So I was thinking, and I want to get your feedback out there. Again, get to me on social media, any way you can get a hold of me. What is the worst case scenario we know in the Stanley Cup playoffs is that the Rangers aren't in it. Okay, I get it. They're not in it 2 years in a row now. Do you care about other teams, that the other races, the races for spot, divisional spots, one of the top three spots in the Metro or the Atlantic, or, who makes it in as an Eastern Conference wild card? The races are amazing, and things change on an everyday basis, depending on the results from, the day before, the night before. Really, in some instances, it changes by the minute. It's been really cool. Listen, I'm a hockey nut. I know this is the Rangers, and we do foreverblueshirts.com, and there's 90% of what we do here is Rangers. but I've worked in the NHL a long time, and I can appreciate a great race, a great playoff race and all that. And we're seeing that in the Eastern Conference. Bigger picture probably should worry you if you're a Rangers fan, because some of these teams are good young teams that are really turning the corner. The Columbus Blue Jackets, the Detroit Red Wings, the Ottawa Senators, right? But what's the worst case scenario here? Who don't you want as a Rangers fan to making the playoffs, to be in the playoffs? Like, do you care if Columbus makes it? Like, I'm actually pulling for Columbus. I was pulling for Columbus last season, especially after the Johnny Gaudreau situation, and his passing and that tragedy. And, they traded Patrick Laine. Everyone left them for, in a heap. They're not a playoff contender. And boy, they very nearly made the playoffs. And terrible start this season. Fire their coach. One of my all-time favorites, Rick Bowness, takes over as head coach. A guy that I worked with back in my Islander days, Bones has his team firing on all cylinders there. They're battling for third place, second place, in the division. Worst case scenario, fighting for a playoff wild card spot in the conference. I get the impression that unless you just hold this massive grudge against John Davidson or Rick Nash, that doesn't bother you, right? If the Columbus Blue Jackets get in, you might even be pulling for them. Yeah, I'd rather see them in than the Islanders. Probably Ranger fans, if they care enough, about other teams, if they care enough, were probably pissed off the other day when Ilya Sorokin shut out the Blue Jackets 1-0. The Islanders, for that moment, flipped ahead of them in the standings. Who's the team that you don't want in there, though? Is it the Islanders? That's the obvious choice, right? Devils aren't in it. They're not in the mix. Is it the Islanders? Is that the team you absolutely don't want to see in the playoffs? You want them to share in the same misery that you're feeling, this season, this spring, when the playoffs get underway. What about the Pittsburgh Penguins? All right. That's a massive Rangers rival. So Sully, his final 3 years in Pittsburgh, couldn't get that team to the playoffs. And he comes here. Rangers just completely fall apart, dismantle, faceplant, worse than they did a year ago. And then former Ranger assistant Dan Muse goes to Pittsburgh, and he is a legitimate coach of the year candidate. And he's got Pittsburgh right now, sitting in second place. Does that piss you off? Do you still hate Sid enough? Listen, I've talked about this before. I respect the heck out of Sidney Crosby. But I know there's a contingent of Ranger fans that still can't stand the guy. So is that enough that, boy, I don't want them in the playoffs? That'll piss me off. Flyers? I don't know. Do you still care enough about the Flyers, hate the Flyers enough that you don't want them to make a run here? Are you worried about Ottawa and Detroit? Boy, if they make the playoffs this season, for Ottawa, it'd be its second year. For Detroit, they haven't made the playoffs in forever. Oh boy, if they get a taste of the playoffs, they're young and up and coming team. They're like Columbus. They're going to be, they're going to be a tough nut to crack for years ahead down the road. The Bruins, do they piss you off? That I thought they weren't going to make the playoffs this season. All of a sudden they turned it around quickly. Or as a Ranger fan, do you look at it and say, see, they turned it around quickly. We can do the same thing next year. Maybe year after, but next year, thinking about next year. I don't know. Who don't you want in? Do you care? Does it matter? Your team's out. Team's been out for, months. So maybe you don't care. Maybe you just care about, the ping pong balls going your way and you win a draft lottery. Though, as Nick and I, we didn't say it on air, as before our interview began, when we were just chatting. Though that didn't exactly go the Rangers' way, 100% the way you would have hoped, in either 2019 or 2020. Ping pong balls went their way. You got Capo Caco with the number 2 pick. You got Alexis Lafreniere with the number 1 pick. All right. All putting all that hope into ping pong balls and having it work out your way for the most part. Wasn't the long-term answer you hoped it would be. So We'll see. That's all for debate and conjecture for next week's show, the following week, the next month, the next couple months, until we get some clarity and players are selected and players are traded. And there's so much ahead, but I'm looking forward to it because it's a lot of fun talking hockey with you. So make sure to continue to like and subscribe here, and make sure to continue to follow us on social media. We'll keep you up to date on that April 4th at Mustang Harry's. We'll let you know when that's set in stone. And special thanks to Nick Alberga for joining us today, teeing it up. The Rangers and the Maple Leafs Wednesday night in Toronto. More importantly, who's the bigger disappointment and who can turn it around quicker among those original 6 teams. So we'll call it a day right here. Thanks for tuning into the podcast, and we'll catch you next week. Cheers.